Hello everyone, now let us discuss the anatomy of larynx and trachea. First of all, coming to anatomy of larynx. The larynx or voice box is a short passageway that connects the laryngopharynx with the trachea. It lies in the midline of the neck anterior to esophagus. Larynx is anterior to esophagus and the location is 4th through 6th cervical vertebrae from C4 to C6. And the wall of the larynx is composed of 9 pieces of cartilage. This is important. The wall of the larynx is composed of 9 pieces of cartilage. 3 occur singly. Thyroid cartilage, epiglottis and cricoid cartilage. And 3 cartilages occur in pairs. They are arytenoid, cuneiform and corniculate cartilages. Of the paired cartilages, the arytenoid cartilages are of most important because they influence the changes in the position and tension of the vocal cords, which are vocal folds, which are nothing but true vocal cords for speech. The extrinsic muscles of the larynx connect the cartilages to other structures in the throat, and the intrinsic muscles connect the cartilages to one another. The cavity of the larynx is the space that extends from the entrance into the larynx down to the inferior border of cricoid cartilage. And the portion of the cavity of the larynx above the vocal folds which are nothing but true vocal cords, is called the vestibule of the larynx. The portion of the cavity of the larynx above the vocal folds is called the vestibule of the larynx. And the thyroid cartilage or Adam's apple consists of two fused plates of hyaline cartilage that form the anterior wall of the larynx and give it a triangular shape. The thyroid cartilage or the Adam's apple consists of two fused plates of hyaline cartilage that form the anterior wall of the larynx and give it a triangular shape. It is present in both males and females but is usually larger in males due to the influence of male sex hormones on its growth during puberty. And the ligament that connects the thyroid cartilage to the hyoid bone is called as thyrohyoid membrane. Next is the epiglottis. Epi means over, glottis is tongue. Is a large leaf-shaped piece of elastic cartilage that is covered with the epithelium. And the stem of the epiglottis is the tapered inferior portion that is attached to the anterior rim of the thyroid cartilage and hyoid bone. The broad superior leaf portion of the epiglottis is unattached and is free to move up and down like a trapdoor. During swallowing, pharynx and larynx rise. Elevation of the pharynx widens it to receive food or drink, and elevation of the larynx causes epiglottis to move down and form a lid over the glottis, that is closing it off. The glottis consists of a pair of folds of mucous membrane, the vocal folds, which are nothing but vocal cords, true vocal cords in the larynx, and the space between them is called rima glottidis. The closing of the larynx in this way during swallowing routes liquids and foods into esophagus and keeps them out of larynx and airways. When small particles of dust, smoke, food or liquids pass into the larynx, a cough reflex occurs, usually expelling the material. And the cricoid cartilage is a ring of hyaline cartilage that forms the inferior wall of the larynx. It is attached to the first ring of cartilage of the trachea by cricotrachea ligament. And the thyroid cartilage is connected to cricoid cartilage by the cricothyroid ligament. The cricoid cartilage is the landmark for making an emergency airway called as tracheostomy. The cricoid cartilage is the landmark for making an emergency airway called as tracheostomy or tracheotomy. The pair of arachnoid cartilages are triangular pieces of mostly hyaline cartilage located at the posterior superior borders of the cricoid cartilage. They form synovial joints with the cricoid cartilage and have a wide range of mobility. The pair of corniculate cartilages, horn-shaped pieces of elastic cartilage, are located at the apex of each arachnoid cartilage. And the paired cuneiform cartilages They are club-shaped elastic cartilages anterior to corniculate cartilages that support the vocal folds and lateral aspects of the epiglottis. The lining of the larynx superior to vocal folds is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. The lining of the larynx that is superior to vocal folds is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. The lining of the larynx inferior to the vocal cords is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium consisting of ciliated columnar cells, globular cells and basal cells. The mucus produced by the globular cells help trap dust particles not removed in the upper passages. That are not removed in the upper passages. The cilia in the upper respiratory tract move mucus and the trapped particles down towards the pharynx, and the cilia in the lower respiratory tract move them up towards the pharynx. Here you can see the anterior and the posterior view of larynx. This thing is the epiglottis and this is the hyoid bone. This is the thyrohyoid membrane. And this is thyroid cartilage or Adam's apple. And here you can see arachnoid cartilage. And finally, this is cricoid cartilage. This part is the cricoid cartilage and this is the arachnoid cartilage. And this is the thyroid gland, and these things, 4 blue color ones, are the parathyroid glands. And this is the tracheal cartilage. Here you can see this is epiglottis, this is the hyoid bone, this is the thyrohyoid membrane, and this is the fat body. This one is the cuneiform cartilage, corniculate cartilage, and these are the arachnoid cartilages. This is the cricoid cartilage, which is the landmark for the tracheostomy. This one is the cricotracheal ligament and this one is the cricothyroid ligament. And this is the tracheal cartilage. Now coming to the structures of voice production. The mucous membrane of the larynx, it forms 2 pairs of folds. A superior pair called as ventricular folds or false vocal cords and an inferior pair called as vocal folds or true vocal cords. Ventricular folds are false vocal cords and vocal folds are true vocal cords. The space between the ventricular folds is known as rima vestibuli, and the laryngeal sinus or the ventricle is a lateral expansion of the middle portion of the laryngeal cavity inferior to the ventricular folds and superior to the vocal folds. While the ventricular folds do not function in voice production, they do have other important functional roles. When the ventricular folds are brought together, they function in holding the breath against the pressure in the thoracic cavity, such as might occur when a person is trained to lift a heavy object. The function of the ventricular folds, whenever the ventricular folds are brought together, they function in holding the breath against the pressure in the thoracic cavity. And the vocal folds are the principal structures of voice production. Deep to the mucous membrane of the vocal folds, which is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, there are bands of elastic ligaments stretched between the rigid cartilages of the larynx like the strings on a guitar, and the intrinsic laryngeal muscles attached to both the rigid cartilages and the vocal folds. When the muscles contract, they move the cartilages, which pulls the elastic ligaments tight, and this stretches the vocal folds out into the airways so that the rima glottidis is narrowed. Whenever the muscles contract, this stretches the vocal folds out into the airways so that the rima glottidis is narrow. And contracting and relaxing the muscles varies the tension in the vocal folds. much like loosening or tightening of a guitar string. Air passing through the larynx vibrates the folds and produces sounds or phonation by setting up sound waves in the column of air in the pharynx, nose and mouth. The variation in the pitch of the sound is related to the tension in the vocal folds. The greater the pressure of air, the louder the sound produced by the vibrating vocal folds. When the intrinsic muscles of the larynx contract, they pull on the arytenoid cartilages, which cause the cartilages to pivot and slide. Contraction of the posterior cricoarytenoid muscles, for example, moves the vocal folds apart, that is abduction, thereby opening the rima glottis. By contrast, contraction of the lateral crioarytenoid muscles, contraction of posterior crioarytenoid muscles, it opens the rima glottis, whereas the contraction of lateral crioarytenoid muscles helps in moving the vocal folds together, that is adduction, thereby closing the rima glottis. Other intrinsic muscles can elongate or shorten the vocal cords. Pitch is controlled by the tension of the vocal folds. The pitch is controlled by the tension of the vocal folds. If they are pulled taut by the muscles, they vibrate more rapidly and higher pitch results. Decreasing the muscular tension on the vocal folds causes them to vibrate more slowly and produces lower pitched sounds. Higher the tension, higher will be the pitch. Decreasing the muscular tension on the vocal folds causes them to vibrate more slowly and produces lower pitched sounds. Due to the influence of androgens, that is male sex hormones, the vocal folds are usually thicker and longer in males than the females, and therefore they vibrate more slowly. This is why a man's voice generally has a lower range of pitch than that of a woman. And the sound originates from the vibration of vocal folds, but other structures are necessary for converting the sound into recognizable speech. The pharynx, mouth, nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses all act as resonating chambers that give the voice its human and individual quality. We produce the vowel sounds by constricting and relaxing the muscles in the walls of the pharynx. We produce the vowel sounds by constricting and relaxing the muscle in the walls of the pharynx. The muscles of the face, tongue and lips help us enunciate words. Whispering is accomplished by closing all but the posterior portion of the rima glottis. Because the vocal folds do not vibrate during whispering, there is no pitch to form a speech. However, we can still produce intelligible speech while whispering by changing the shape of the oral cavity as we enunciate. And as the size of the oral cavity changes, its resonance qualities change, which imparts a vowel-like pitch to air as it rushes towards the lips. Here you can see this is the thyroid cartilage and this is the cricoid cartilage. This one is the vocal ligament and this is the arachnoid cartilage and this one is the posterior crioarytenoid muscle. This is tongue and this is epiglottis. These are the vocal folds and the white ones are the vocal folds or true vocal cords. And the space between the vocal folds is rima glottis. This one is the rima glottis. And these two are the vestibular folds or false vocal cords. This one is the cuneiform cartilage and this one is the corniculate cartilage. Here you can see the rima closing, opening and closing of the rima glottidis. Here the rima glottidis is open and whereas here it is closed. The posterior crioarytenoid muscles, when they contract, they open the rima glottidis. Whereas the lateral crioarytenoid muscles, when they contract, they close the rima glottidis. Now coming to trachea. Now coming to trachea or windpipe is a tubular passageway for air that is about 12 centimeters long and 2.5 centimeters in diameter. It is located anterior to the esophagus. Trachea is located anterior to the esophagus and extends from the larynx to the superior border of the fifth thoracic vertebrae, where it divides into right and left primary bronchi. At the fifth thoracic vertebrae, trachea divides into right and left primary bronchi. The layers of the tracheal wall from deep to superficial are mucosa, submucosa, hyaline cartilage and adventia, composed of alveolar connective tissue. The mucosa of the trachea consists of an epithelial layer of pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium and an underlying layer of lamina propria that contains elastic and reticular fibers. It provides the same protection against the dust as the membrane lining the nasal cavity and larynx. The next is submucosa. It consists of alveolar connective tissue that contains seromucous glands and their ducts. The next is 16 to 20 incomplete horizontal rings of hyaline cartilage. 16 to 20 incomplete horizontal rings of hyaline cartilage. They resemble the letter C, are sagged above one another, and they are connected together by dense connective tissue. They may be felt through the skin inferior to the larynx. The open part of each C-shaped cartilage ring faces posteriorly towards the esophagus and is spanned by the fibromuscular membrane. Within its membrane are transverse smooth muscle fibers called as trachealis muscle and elastic connective tissue that allows the diameter of the trachea to change subtly during inhalation and exhalation, which is important in maintaining efficient airflow. The solid C-shaped cartilage rings provide a semi-rigid support to maintain patency so that the tracheal wall does not collapse inward, especially during inhalation, and obstruct the air passageway. And the adventia of the trachea consists of alveolar connective tissue that joins the trachea to surrounding tissues. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for further videos on medical coding and CPC training.